Welcome to the Quilted Stitchers of Fabric Creations. I'm Phyllis,
I'm Phyllis.
and since we're not able to have Quilt Guild meetings right now where we can all get together, we're going to do a demo today of precision pinning for precision piecing. And this is a block that I made with the Belgrade, Missouri Star Quilt Guild for the quilt that we're doing this year. And on a block like this, if these points don't match, you can really see it. And my friend Phyllis has developed a technique for pinning that really makes a difference for precision piecing. And we're going to show that to you today. We're also going to show you some of the tools that we use that allow us to have precision piecing. So Phyllis, I'll let you take it from here.
We're not starting at the very beginning. The very beginning would have to do with measuring and accurately cutting. We're passing that up to really focus on pinning. Different people have a different threshold of perfection. In my case, I'm kind of OCD about wanting my seams to match up. There are some tricks, such as pressing so that the two seams nest. Instead of being on top of each other, the seam comes together like this to have a smoothness. In Phyllis's block, there are quite a few things that need to be matched. There's the center, there's this side, and as Phyllis said, if this doesn't line up, then this isn't a straight line, and it needs to be a straight line. There are some people that will say the quilting will take care of that. There are other people that say it's good enough. There are other people that say can't tell from a galloping horse. I'm one of those people that says I'm not satisfied with any of those. I want it to match. I want it to be perfect. And if it's not, I rip it out and I redo it. So let me talk about pins first. When I first started quilting, I went to Joann's and I bought quilter's pins. You know these. They're thick. They've got a big yellow head on them. It's really hard to bend them. They also, you have to sometimes work or run it through your hair to get a little oil on it in order to get it to go through your fabric. It moves your fabric. I didn't have a lot of control. Then I met Phyllis. And Phyllis introduced me to these clover pins. They're 4mm ultra fine pins. They slide into the fabric. The point is really like a needle, and so it easily goes into the fabric. It works really good. Drawback, they're really easily bent. Maybe easily is too much, but I bent them. Then they came out with a bone pin. It's also 4mm, so it's got the same thickness. It's about the same length. The top is a different color, but it's stronger. It's thin, but it's stronger. And that point is really pointy.
And those are actually made with piano wire.
That's true. They're made with piano wire, and as a result, they don't bend as easily. Can you bend them? Yes. Do they bend more easily than these elephant ones? Yes. But with some care, they don't bend nearly as easily as these. I like both, and I use both. I want to talk a minute about thread. Everybody has their own. I made clothing for a long time, and when I did, I used Coats and Clark. Whatever was the cheapest, and Coats and Clark was it, is what I used. as I started quilting, one of the things I noticed that I hadn't noticed with clothing was all of the lint that accumulated in my sewing machine. And I went to a quilt camp, and the quilt camp suggested this Aurifil as the choice. And so I then bought this size spool of Aurifil in all kinds of colors. And I went to another quilt camp where some excellent teachers were talking, and they said, you don't need all those colors. Their suggestion was to use gray. And there's a dark gray and a medium gray and a light gray. I like the medium gray. And what it really does is it kind of absorbs the color. So let's talk about why they like the Aurifil. They like the Aurifil because it's a thinner thread. Strong, really strong, but it's thinner. It sews in. It doesn't add 2 or 3 additional threads to whatever I'm piecing. And I don't have the lint. So when you're thinking about buying new thread, try Aurifil or something that is a high quality, thinner thread. I'm going to talk about different ways to pin. As I said previously, I made clothing. When I made clothing, I took the pin and the head of the pin was on the outside. Hopefully you can see it. Now I'm quilting. I don't put the pin that way. For one thing, a lot of times I want the pin to stay put. I don't want to pull it out as it's going under the feed dogs. So I put my pins either this way, which is, and I'm going to sew here, which is with the head on the inside, or I put my pins parallel to the seam. When I put them parallel, I generally set them in quite a bit, maybe a 1/2 inch or so. That stabilizes this fabric, and it doesn't allow my pin to interfere and move my fabric. This is often a very difficult thing for people that are used to pinning like they did when they made clothing to get used to. But what people tell me and what people complain about is they do a beautiful 1/4 inch seam. Then they get to the end and it's either small or it's large, and they don't understand why. I'm going to show you what I do to make sure that doesn't happen. I did not come up with this. I may have modified it a little bit, but I did not come up with this. What I do is I take the ends and I pin those ends together. And you'll notice I'm not right up at the seam. I've given myself a little bit of space. Then I come back and I'm going to sew this direction with this on my right. I put another pin parallel to the seam I'm going to sew. And at the end, I put a pin to where as it's sewing, as I'm sewing, I can simply pull the pin out. I'm sewing this way. When I get there, I pull it out. Sometimes I don't just go through it once, especially if I've had trouble with that seam. This particular seam is thicker on one side than it is the other, because this has a seam and this side doesn't. So I would probably go up and down a couple of times. And you can see, as I'm sewing, when I get to that pin, I can pull it out. It's holding that fabric. I have more control. This pin is making sure it doesn't slip one way or push. Because you know how sometimes the fabric, the top fabric will push, and when you get done, you'll look and say, well, I had them lined up. How come it pushed the top fabric or the bottom? Usually it's the top fabric. How come it isn't aligned anymore? With the particular block that we're talking about, if it pushes it, these lines are not going to match up. We're back after having sewn the 2 seams that I pinned earlier, and I want to look to see if what I did worked. So let's look at our seam. I'm looking at it from the wrong side, and I'm laying this down. Notice that here it's a 1/4 inch and there it's a 1/4 inch. If you have a magic wand from Studio 180, you can lay it on there and see here and here, it's right. It's exactly where it needs to be, which it's not short, it's not long. Now before we press it, let me show you why that is so important. We know that we need to have our lines go straight. If I've done this correctly, I've got a 1/4 inch there so that when I sew this seam, it's going to nudge right in there. If I go over here, I've got that 1/4 inch seam. It's not too much, it's not too little. I can do a 1/4 inch seam and it's going to be exactly where it needs to be. The piece is now sewn together and it's back from pressing. At this point, we have the pieces sewn together. We've checked to make sure we've got the 1/4 inch seam and that we didn't make the seam at the end or the beginning wider or narrower. Now it's time to place it on the rest of the block that we've already finished. Let's look at this. This is where it's going to go. That's its placement. Before we pressed it, we needed to look at how it was going to fit. These seams, in order to line up the best, they need to nest. Nest means one goes one way and one goes the other. If perchance you have done this and you've realized, oh, I have that seam going the other direction, just go back and repress it. It won't hurt anything. Now I'm going to bring it up and I'm going to start in the center. This is what I'm talking about regarding nesting. See how nice those two fit together? It's like a jigsaw puzzle. They fit perfectly together. I'm going to take this and I'm going to put a pin there because I want it to match exactly. Actually, what I just did is what most people do. What I do is I go about 1/4 inch out and I put a vertical pin. Then I go and I check it because if you look right here, I've got 2 other pieces that it has to fit against. I need my seam to match right there. So I put the pin right where I want that seam to go. Well, this pin is up and down. I'm going to make sure it's vertical. I'm going to take another pin, and this is again where these real thin pins work, and put a pin very close to the perpendicular one. I'm going to the other side and I'm going to do the same thing. When the sewing machine feed dogs come to that pin, it's not going to be able to slip this way or this way. It's going to be perfect. Now I'm going to the next one. This one is a little trickier. This is a half square triangle and this is a half square triangle. We want our seam to be right there. And on this side, we want it to be right there. While these nest, it could still slip. So I take the pin, I put it through the intersection on the top, I check it, I'm not there. I thought I was, I move it over. I check it again. That pin is exactly where I want my threads to go. I bring it over here, it's much easier because I can see it from the front side, and I put my pin in. Again, I put my pin vertical. I take two other pins, and I put one very close there, another very close there. I have now stabilized it. I can take this pin out. On the end, I'm going to do this the same way I did before. I'm going to put my pin in near the end. And I'm going to do another one where I thread it. That will keep the fabric from going this way or this way, because I want it to come out at 1/4 inch. I'm going to repeat that process again. On the other side, remember, here is a half square triangle. Here's a half square triangle. I want this and this to be my point. I start on the top. I find that juncture, I put it through, I check it. And it looks like I hit it the first time. Now I'm going to thread it through the other one. These nest, which is going to be an advantage, but it's not enough. I don't want it to move. I take another pin, I put it very close, and another pin on the other side, very close. And I take this pin out. This is my starting point. Now this one I'm doing, you noticed I did a little bit differently. I don't want that to slip, and this is really thick here. So I'm going to put this pin in just to hold it while I put two more pins in that will help me start my seam. And I'm going to take it out. If you're a pinner like I am, you're going to put another one right there that kind of helps stabilize it, especially since I'm going to be aiming toward these heavy seams. And notice they're back pretty good. They're not right on the edge, but it makes sure that this doesn't slip one way or the other to where it's going to make it uneven. And we're also looking at, there's bias involved, and I want everything to fit properly and not slip. Now I'm going to check on that side, and you can see I thought it was even, but it wasn't. So I need to move it out just a little bit more. Remember that I'm kind of persnickety. You might not be as persnickety. So now then, this is all pinned and it's ready to sew. If everything's right, all of those seams will match up perfectly. I won't lose a point, and it will be a perfect line down the center like this. We're back. We have now sewn the seam that was pinned. It's now test time. It's time to take the pins out and to see how we did.
And yes, we did sew over the pins.
And as I'm looking at this, it looks to me like the edges match up exactly like they're supposed to. But this is the telltale thing. Will these seams match up? that seam comes right in where it's supposed to, and it matches up exactly. Look at this seam. This seam matches up exactly. You did not lose a point. This seam matches up exactly. Did not lose a point, and it goes straight. So we have maintained a 1/4 inch seam. The 1/4 inch seam is straight. The pinning worked, and it's now time to press the seam.